Oliver Twist was written by Charles Dickens in the year 1838. It's a good book, but it's also really long, clocking in at over 150,000 words. It was originally published 2 to 3 chapters a month, which took a little over 2 years. I tried to keep my summary of the book reasonably short, but it's probably going to be about 20 minutes long.
Argo Fump Book Review, Argo Fump Book Review.
An unknown homeless woman is taken into a workhouse. She gives birth and dies before she has a chance to name her son. The child is given the name Oliver Twist. Oliver's life is terrible. The woman who runs the orphanage hoards all of the childcare money for herself. It's like she's running an experiment to figure out the least amount of food that a child can eat without dying. She believes it's a kindness to starve children. She doesn't want them to have the inconvenience of too much food. This book has a lot of dark humor like that. Dickens regularly insults the charitable institutions that take care of the poor and homeless, which do more harm than good. As Dickens says, the poorhouse doesn't give the option of saving people's lives, it just gives people the option of dying less quickly. Dickens specifically targets the people who run these institutions. He makes fun of them for being incompetent, foolish, self-important, and just plain cruel. For example, a poor man needs a blanket to survive a snowstorm. The charity gives him food that he doesn't need. When he complains he needs a blanket, they get indignant and complain he's an ungrateful jerk. The homeless man dies in a snowstorm that night. The charity people figure it serves him right for being so ungrateful. That's hypocritical humor, it's dark humor. I can understand if readers find it shocking, not funny. The extreme cruelty is supposed to be shocking. The cruelty to the poor is a theme throughout the entire book. The first 8 chapters especially focus on it. Oliver's primary caregiver is a beetle named Mr. Bumble. As his name indicates, he is an incompetent bumbler who can't do anything right. He's so self-righteous he doesn't realize he's abusing his power over others and making Oliver's life miserable. Mr. Bumble takes 9-year-old Oliver before the board of directors. They decide he should pick oakum in the workhouse for the rest of his life. They're confused when Oliver starts crying. Doesn't he know poor people love working for no wages? The meals at the workhouse are so tiny the boys can't survive. They decide someone has to ask the caregivers for more food. There's a group vote, and they pick Oliver as their representative. This leads to the most famous scene of the book, where Oliver takes his empty bowl to a worker and says, "Please, sir, I want some more." The charity people are shocked by Oliver's audacity. How dare he ask for more food? Only a demon would say that. Oliver is beaten and locked up. The parish puts out a public notice saying they will pay £5 to anyone willing to take Oliver off their hands. Oliver is given to an undertaker named Mr. Sowerberry. Oliver is reasonably happy here. Everything's ruined by a poor charity boy named Noah Claypole. Noah is used to being scorned by everyone else, so he's delighted he can make fun of Oliver for being even worse off than him. Noah constantly insults Oliver. When he makes fun of Oliver's dead mother, Oliver fights back. Noah pretends to be a helpless victim. He says Oliver's a violent maniac who attacked him for no reason. The adults severely punish Oliver instead of listening to him. Oliver feels like he has no choice but to run away from his life and go to London. This leads to the next major section of the book. Oliver makes a friend, a boy named Jack Dawkins, better known as the Artful Dodger. The Dodger says he knows a nice guy named Fagin, who will be more than happy to give Oliver free food, clothing, and a place to stay. If it sounds too good to be true, it is. Oliver doesn't realize that Fagin and the boys with him are professional thieves. When they practice their robbing skills, Oliver mistakenly thinks they're playing a strange game. They all laugh at how naive and innocent Oliver is. Fagin is evil, cruel, manipulative, and greedy. He is a racist stereotype of Jewish people. After getting complaints, Charles Dickens rewrote the book to make Fagin less racist, although there are still many places where he's called the Jew. My policy is to take 5 points off of a book score if it has bad racist or sexist material. This book meets that criteria. After several days, Fagin sends Oliver out with the other boys. Oliver's shocked when he sees them rob a man at a bookstall. Oliver runs away in terror, which makes him look guilty. A large crowd chases after Oliver. He's caught and taken to police magistrate Fang for sentencing. Oliver's trial is comically ridiculous. Fang threatens to send people to jail because they're annoying him. Fang demands to have testimony from Oliver, even though Oliver's unconscious. When Oliver is cleared by last-minute testimony, Fang accuses the victim of making up the whole plot as a cover for stealing books. The victim, Mr. Brownlow, is a kind gentleman. He takes Oliver home with him, and he has Oliver nursed back to health. Oliver's never been treated so well in his entire life. I imagine some abridged versions of the book end here, with Brownlow unofficially adopting Oliver. It would be a fine ending point. Mr. Brownlow has a portrait of a woman who looks just like Oliver. I wonder why. Tragically, Oliver and Brownlow are interrupted before they can clear up the situation. If they had talked fully, the next 300 pages of the book might have been avoided. Fagin goes to his boss, Bill Sikes, a cruel man who beats his dog. The poor dog. Sikes and Fagin are worried that Oliver will say something to expose their criminal organization. They send Sikes' girlfriend, a woman named Nancy, to eliminate the threat Oliver poses. Nancy pretends to be Oliver's older sister as she makes inquiries. The first time Oliver leaves Mr. Brownlow's house, Nancy captures him and takes him back to Fagin. Fagin and the thieves keep Oliver locked inside their house for a long time. They slowly try to poison his mind, hoping that Oliver will eventually give in and join their gang. Sikes forces Oliver to help with a robbery. The plan is that Oliver will crawl into a house through a tiny panel, then unlock the doors from the inside. The break-in is instantly discovered. Oliver is shot and falls unconscious. Sikes and the other robbers run away, leaving Oliver to die. This is about a third of the way through the book. I'm sorry to say it's where I lost interest in the story, because the book purposely ignores Oliver after this. He practically disappears from his own book. It is 10 long chapters before Oliver next speaks. A lot of this felt, to me, like the author was purposely wasting time. Dickens even makes a joke out of it, apologizing to the readers for not talking more about Mr. Bumble. Because clearly people want to hear more about Bumble's love life than about Oliver dying. Mr. Bumble becomes taken with a woman named Mrs. Corney. He makes pitiful attempts to romance her. Mrs. Corney briefly leaves to hear the deathbed confession of a nurse who robbed Oliver's mother. While Corney is gone, Mr. Bumble tastelessly goes through all of her things to determine how rich she is. He decides she has enough money to suit his purposes. So when Mrs. Corney returns, Mr. Bumble romances her with wine and proposes marriage. Bumble stops by the Sowerberries afterwards. He sees a drunk Noah kissing Charlotte. Mr. Bumble raises a huge fuss over Noah's inappropriate behavior, even though Noah is basically doing the exact same thing that Bumble did 5 minutes earlier. We'll return to Noah's story in 14 chapters. Fagin's gang is unhappy to learn about the failed robbery. Nancy's particularly upset that Oliver is dead. A new major villain appears. He is the mysterious Mr. Monks. Monks complains he wanted to get revenge by having Oliver arrested. He offers Fagin a large amount of money to turn Oliver into a thief. I think this scene should have occurred 10 chapters earlier. It's weird to have Monks offer a reward for corrupting Oliver when he thinks Oliver is dead. Luckily, Oliver is not dead. He's badly wounded. He's put in the care of Mrs. Maylie, the rich woman who owns the house. She and her adopted daughter Rose take pity on the unconscious Oliver. They refuse to believe such a nice boy could be a criminal. With the help of a doctor, they deliberately interfere with the police investigation to remove all suspicion from Oliver. Their plan works, mainly because the only witnesses are two cowardly servants named Giles and Brittles, who humorously pretend to be brave heroes. Rose and Mrs. Maylie nurse Oliver back to health, and he spends several happy months with them. Rose suddenly takes ill. When Oliver rushes to get a doctor, he has the misfortune of running into Mr. Monks. Monks is furious to learn Oliver is still alive. Rose recovers from her illness. Mrs. Maylie's son Harry rushes to the house. He's passionately in love with Rose and he wants to marry her. She loves him too, but she's worried because she's an orphan with unknown parents. If it turns out her relatives are bad, that could stain Harry's reputation and ruin his career in Parliament. Then we have another gap without any Oliver scenes, this one 5 chapters long. Mr. Bumble is quickly married, and just as quickly, he becomes unhappy. The new Mrs. Bumble publicly humiliates him, constantly insults him, and occasionally beats him. Monks meets with the Bumbles. He pays them £25 to have the locket which was stolen from Oliver's mother. The locket has a ring with her name inside. Monks destroys it so no one will ever know who Oliver's mother is. Well, no one except the Bumbles. They're not the right people to trust with your criminal secrets, but I suppose Monks doesn't have a choice in the matter. Monks returns to Fagin's gang and brags that his plans are successful. He will now get all of the money. He calls Oliver his brother and laughs over how Rose would be surprised to learn who Oliver really is. Nancy overhears the conversation. Nancy is not truly a bad person. She's wanted to leave the gang for a long time, but she can't because she's in love with Sykes despite all his evil. Nancy doesn't want Oliver to suffer anymore, so she sneaks out of the house, goes to Rose, and repeats everything that Monks said. Rose can't stop Monks by herself. She needs the help of a gentleman. Right on cue, Oliver appears and says he just saw Mr. Brownlow. There's a happy reunion, and Brownlow readily agrees to help stop Monks. After this brief scene, Oliver disappears from the book for another 10 chapters. The story goes back to Noah Claypole. He and his girlfriend Charlotte run away to London. She's too much in love with him to realize that he only invited her in case he gets in trouble with the police. He needs her as a convenient scapegoat. Noah joins Fagin's gang. His first job is to watch the trial of the Artful Dodger, who was arrested for stealing a snuff box. Nancy tries to meet with Mr. Brownlow, but Sykes won't let her leave the house. Nancy's actions raise Fagin's suspicions. He asks Noah to secretly follow her. Noah sees everything when Nancy gives Brownlow all the information he needs to find Monks. Sykes is furious when he learns Nancy is a traitor to the gang. She begs for mercy and pleads with him to end his life of evil. Instead, Sykes ends her life. Nancy's murder can be seen as a good thing because it prompts the police to finally do something about the criminals. Fagin and most of the gang members are arrested. Sykes is racked with guilt. He flees London in a panic. The police soon catch up to him. He tries to escape down the side of a building using a rope. He accidentally hangs himself. Brownlow meets with Monks, and readers get a full explanation of events, which is both long and long overdue. Monks and Oliver are half brothers. They have the same father, who separated from his first wife and remarried. He and both his wives are long since dead. The father left behind a large fortune for Oliver on the condition that Oliver doesn't have a criminal record. That's why Monks tried to get Oliver arrested. Monks wants to have the fortune all to himself. Brownlow was best friends with Oliver's father. That's why Brownlow had a portrait of Oliver's mother. What's more, Oliver's mother was Rose's sister. That means Rose is Oliver's aunt. The two orphans are glad to learn they're related. Now Rose knows her true parentage. She's free to marry Harry Maylie and live happily ever after. The villains do not live so happily. Fagin goes mad in the days before his execution. Monks leaves the country and quickly squanders his small inheritance. The Bumbles are reduced to poverty. In an act of cruel irony, they are forced to live in the very same workhouse that Bumble used to run. The end. Post-book follow-up. I pointed out the 3 large gaps without Oliver, which make up 25 chapters, or half the book. I was not joking when I said I mostly lost interest in the book after Oliver left the story. A huge chunk of the book is the villains interacting with each other. I didn't like it. I struggled to understand what was happening in the villain chapters. Part of that is because the characters are all lying and purposely deceiving each other, so you can't trust what's being said. It doesn't help that the truth of Monks' story is deliberately kept a secret from the readers until the end. There's also a language barrier. The gang members use 1800s street slang. Occasionally, Dickens translates the obscure words into more common English, but there were plenty of times where a character said a sentence and I had no idea what they meant. It feels odd to say this, but Oliver doesn't have much of a personality. Running away to London is one of the few decisions he makes on his own. He's mostly forced into everything else. Oliver is portrayed as a good person, an innocent victim of bad circumstances, whereas the adults are treated as truly bad people. Rose is also portrayed as truly good and innocent. I thought she was most interesting when she was openly contrasted with Nancy, who's the same age as her. I think Rose and her romance with Harry was introduced too late into the book to be effective. We saw far more of Mr. Bumble and Noah Claypole than we did of Rose. Arguably, the same goes for Monks, who's supposed to be the main villain of the book. I can understand why various adaptations of the book tend to leave Rose out completely, or combine her with Brownlow, who fills the same narrative purpose of being the nice person who takes care of Oliver. I can also understand why Monks is often removed from the story, as he's the least interesting villain. I should note that it's a contrived coincidence that the gang's 2 robbery victims, picked at random, are Oliver's aunt and his only family friend. He really lucked out there, huh? If I didn't know any better, I'd say the gang was trying to give Oliver a happy ending by throwing him directly at the 2 people most likely to adopt him. I understand why this book is considered a literary classic. It's got a lot of good material with plenty of social commentary, deep themes, and decent characters. I didn't like the final 2/3, which mostly ignores Oliver. I would like it better if it was half as long. And indeed, it would not be a monumental task to find plenty of material to condense or remove. I was going to give this book 6 points. When I remove 5 points for the racist depiction of Fagin, I give Oliver Twist a 1 out of 10. Feel free to leave a comment on this video letting me know your thoughts on the book and why I'm mispronouncing the name Brownlow. It's probably not Brownlow, it's probably Brownlow. I'm sorry if I annoyed anybody by saying Brownlow.